course, this has got some beautiful music in the background, which we don't have, and the effects are much more...
Have you turned the volume up on the laptop?
I don't know, but it's fine. The images are sufficient. It gives a message. You'll understand what I think based on the talk, you'll know what we're trying to highlight to people. Is obviously they're here, they live amongst us, and it's about respecting other species. So when you hear it with music, of course you'll cry. This is highlighting the number of birds that we get called out. These are our pictures of birds that we've gone out to rescue, where we've had to call the proprietor, fire brigade, because by law, obviously, it's under the 2006 Animal Welfare Act, a suffering animal, and they've got to come out and rescue it. We take all the netting off of it, and if they're well enough, they're released back into their flocks. It's about raising awareness, especially in the city when it comes to netting, because everything is being netted. Car parks, supermarkets, buildings, anything and everywhere. Bridges are the biggest problem. We always encourage organisations to use metal mesh, and at least they don't get tangled up in it. But I say to people, just look up, wherever you are, look up, and just look out for them and help them.
Just to say a few of these, because I live in Leighton, so quite local to here, and a few of those pictures are actually in Walthamstow, netting on churches, netting on other buildings. We had netting on Walthamstow Library, which trapped lots of birds, which I successfully got removed. But there's still quite a bit of netting on buildings, and I've had to call the fire brigade on a few occasions, so if you don't mind keeping an eye out. Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah.
When you say for instance, on the library, do you then follow it through with the council?
I did with the library, and I eventually had basically with the library, they kept repairing the netting, but the netting was all over the place and it was impossible. Some buildings it's impossible to net because the netting is too vast, and you repair one bit and then the hole in that bit and then they repair. And it was just ongoing for years, and every time they repaired it, more birds got trapped. I eventually had a meeting with the library and they agreed to remove it. They realised that it just didn't work and it just trapped birds. So sometimes if you persist, you're lucky, but as I say, it takes years. It takes a lot of work sometimes.
And it needs a lot more of us to persist and place complaints and raise awareness and also be aware that this is happening. A lot of the time we don't even look up or see birds struggling, caught by one leg or one wing. And in fact, under the 2006 Animal Welfare Act, it covers all animals. If you see an animal suffering, it is all of our duty and responsibility to stop that suffering, regardless of the species. And we are extremely grateful to the fire brigade that helps us out 9 times out of 10. Well, we can go up and do things ourselves, we will, but of course you can't put volunteers' lives in danger, and a lot of the time these things are really high. And some people see this as a waste of public money. If it was a swan, it'd be okay. If it's a pigeon, it's not. But actually, the way that the fire service look at this, they will always prioritise human calls first. They will only go out if there's no human calls. And they see this as training exercises to get their new recruits to actually do jobs that they've never been on before. And so it works both ways. They do real life rescue, whether it's a bird caught up in netting, obviously for us is extremely helpful. But they wouldn't want any of us to put our own lives in danger, to do stupid things that they can come out and do in minutes. So that's it, really. So I thought we could talk about plants and gardens. I don't know much about plants, but I've actually asked for advice on for instance, bats. Bats are endangered species. They're in huge decline. There's only 18 species in the UK. I've asked my bat person what plants would really encourage the bat population, to grow and encourage them to come over. And so water, put a pond in, you know, that's very attractive to them. They always hover over water. If anybody knows anything about bats, I go on bat walks. They are incredible creatures, and I didn't even realise we had bats here, but we do, and they're beautiful. Honeysuckle, herbs, lavender. Lavender is actually a very popular plant because it's really good, it attracts bees. The bee population is in huge decline, so lavender is a really a common plant to be advising people to have. Night scented stock. I'm sure you all know what that is. I don't, I'm afraid. And she said trees, rowan,
Yeah.
and hawthorn.
Hawthorn.
So that's the Bat Lady's recommendations if we have an interest in increasing, especially in endangered species such as bats. We don't take in bats. You have to be licensed to take in bats. We refer all bat calls to the Bat Conservation Society. Again, there are so many other parties that where we can't help, we will always recommend the relevant parties that can help, such as the Swift Conservations, Bat Conservation Society, and again, you know, there'll be hedgehog people, squirrel people, and so on. I have my old lady next door who has 2 bushes that are full of nesting birds, tiny little blue tits, and she's got lots of robins. Actually, I've got 3 in my garden, but they all come from her side. And her 2 bushes are called Japonica, and Forsythia, yes. So she said, you could recommend those, and again, lavender for bees. But she says, tell them to have lots of flowers for butterflies and all the insects. So that's my contribution to the gardening people. I'm afraid I don't have green fingers. For the first time ever, I've grown some rosemary, and I'm very proud of it. But you know, I would like, if there's no hedgehogs, there's a reason. Hedgehogs are in decline as well because everybody has a concrete base on their fencing. People have got rid of their bushes and they've put big fencing instead. They don't really have bushes anymore. I mean, for once upon a time, I think gardens used to be separated just by a hedge. That doesn't happen anymore. We don't see many hedges anymore. The slug pellets. Slugs are their food. They eat snails, they eat slugs, worms, and plants, yes. But if you kill the insects, the slugs, or anything that other animals eat, then the other animals die. You use pesticides on plants to make your flowers and growth look pretty, but the blue tits have no food, the robins have no food, and you know, you always have to think of the food chain. And it is a difficult one, but sometimes you have to weigh up. You know, do I want my garden to look pretty during nesting season, or can it wait? Can I just snip a few bits here and there manually and just keep it as late as possible? You know, slug pellets are, you know, they really are poisonous, obviously, for the slugs, but not just the slugs, but anything else that eats them. Poisons used on rats or mice. Rats and mice are then eaten by crows, magpies, jays, who get very, very sick and end up with us as poisoned birds, and a lot of the time they die. Or birds of prey take them, they see a body, they take them, they end up grounded, sick and poisoned as well. The fox population, people that hate foxes. Foxes eat rats. If we didn't have foxes, we would be inundated by rats. That is their food. But then,
so I stopped feeding them.
Yeah.
So now I haven't got any sparrows.
yeah, and that goes back to my responsible ownership of cats conversation, where you know, you love your sparrow, someone else loves their cat, and it's educating everybody. Everything has a knock-on effect. So if you have any friends with cats, encourage them to keep the cats in, let them out as late as possible, bring them in as early as possible, and you know, they'll get into a routine. Mine do. Mine go out as late as possible in the morning. You know, I feed them as late as possible so they don't leave the house. You know, the cat flap is locked. And I bring them in as early as possible. You know, even in the summer, it doesn't get dark until gone 9, but 6 o'clock, they're locked in. That's it. They're staying in. Because I need the birds, you know, I have an interest in the birds surviving. I am lucky that my cats are not really killers. I mean, they're 8 years old, and I think think I've had 3 deaths in 8 years by the same cat, Betty. But yeah, I was speaking to another lady, but some cats have a higher instinct to kill than others. And I'm often asked, how do we stop our cats from attacking birds? Fuss them up, humanise them a lot more. A lot of the time, they want to bring presents in. So,
They're feeding their family.
Cats?
Cats are feeding their family when they bring their birds in.
Oh, as in you're their family. Yeah, it's a present. It's like, look, mummy, look what I brought you. But actually, if you tell them, I love you anyway without any presents, then it doesn't always stop them. But if you fuss them up a lot, it does minimise it because they lose that real killer instinct, especially if they're around you the whole time. It is a difficult one. Again, it's managing.
A cat is the nearest thing to a wild animal you're getting to your house.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
You don't own the cat owns you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We are slaves to our animals. That's very true. So, yeah. If you look at the back of the leaflet,
Isn't there things we can do without having to ring you up? Or while we're waiting?
it really depends on if it's had contact with the cat, which in this case it would have done.
Yeah.
It needs antibiotics as soon as possible.
Right.
Cat saliva is poison to any animal. Even with us, if a cat bites you or scratches you, you'll see that the infection flares up quite quickly. And we are so much bigger than they are. Imagine on a much smaller animal, the infection kicks in straight away. So in pigeons, it needs to be administered within 24 hours, at best 48 if they make it, but within 24 hours it's got to be administered. If it's a little garden bird, in most cases it will die, even if it's just contact. Most people think, oh, there's nothing wrong with it, I'm going to release it. Actually, that bird's just going to die. So the quicker you can get it to a rehabber to give it a dose of antibiotics, ideally within 2 hours, it's got a better chance to live. If it's left longer than that, most of the animals that come to us, they've had them all day, don't know what to do with them, and then they find us and then they call us, but it's too late. They die the next day.
The baby bird would be disowned by the mother, wouldn't it?
Well, if it's been brought to you, you won't know where to put it back anyway. So you can't put a baby bird in someone else's nest. It's got to be with their parents, so you're not going to know who their parents are. So one of the things actually I do want to speak about, which I've had many conversations with members of the public about, and I used to think this as well, so that's fine. I see birds and pigeons and crows with these great big claws, and I thought, well, when a bird falls out of a nest, their baby, they're just going to come down, grab it, and take it back to the nest. And I used to watch and wait for that to happen. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in any bird species. They're not eagles. They don't come down, pick up their babies and put them back in their nest. Once a bird is grounded, it is grounded, and it stays grounded, and it is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to absolutely anything and everything predator, whether it's a ground mammal or any other bigger bird, because it's then visible. So if you see a grounded bird, it needs help. If you see any wild animal that you can catch, it needs help, because you're not supposed to touch or go near a wild animal. So always think of it in terms of, that way, especially if you see a bird, that's what tends to happen. So if you see a baby animal, for sure, it is in need of help. But if it's had contact with a cat, it needs antibiotics as soon as possible.
You haven't spoken much about foxes, you mentioned just now.
Yes.
I have a problem with foxes in our garden. they not only dig holes, I've got cats as well.
Yes.
So the foxes come in the house at night and steal my things.
Yes.
So now I kind of have to...
They're coming through your cat flap.
They're coming through the cat flap.
So first of all, you should keep your cats locked in at
I
night.
can't lock the cat flap any
Yeah.
longer because
Yeah.
they've scratched the rubber off of it, so it doesn't lock any longer.
Oh.
And so at 2 o'clock in the morning I woke up with this enormous thumping going on the stairs and came down. The fox is in the lounge.
Yes. Mange is a mite that's easily treatable. It's very easily treatable, and we work with Mama Cat Trust, who gives advice to the individuals. You know, she works with people in local areas on how to treat your local foxes for mange. You know, some areas are more affected than others. And there are people that are willing to help them and want to help them and say, oh, I can see them. Mange is a really easily treatable condition, but it's awful how they end up. You know, they'll start limping. So most of the calls are, there's a fox, it looks really bad and it's limping, I think it's got a broken leg, but actually it's the mange that's caused it. Eventually it will make it go blind, they'll run into the road, get hit by cars and killed, or they'll just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it is just a drop on the back of the neck, and that's it. You know, dogs would have it, it's actually a dog mite, but all our dogs are treated.
And you can
I just wonder how you can deter them, because I think there's quite a lot, and I see them in the, you know, the front garden, you see them in the back garden, and they don't look like they've got mange. I have to show you a photo. The thing looks like it's had a bath in someone's fucking coat.
Well, they're probably someone else's foxes that they're feeding and you know, humanising. Again, we can't control what everybody does with the animals. We never encourage humanising wild animals. Wild animals should be left wild, and you know, we say don't hurt them, don't abuse them, respect them, don't humanise them. You know, while we always, you know, we rescue, we release wherever possible.
If you want.